Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hope everybody is doing well. Tonight I wanted to check in with what I've been reading lately. I have four books finished and started a fifth one. And it's been a pretty good last week and a half or so of reading since I last checked in. So let's just get right into it. So the first book that I finished was Evelina by Burney. I did talk a little bit about this in the last check-in because I was not yet finished with it, but I was pretty good, maybe 2/3 of the way into it at that time. This is the story of Evelina, who is an orphan. She's living with a pastor who appears to be just a single guy. He's raised her since birth, and he also, I guess, raised her mother for a season anyway. And so he has a lot of, fatherly love for her and just wants the best for her. And so they live in a little country village. Well, she gets invited to go stay with some friends. And so she goes for a little bit and they end up going to London. And throughout the story, she's kind of back and forth between London and other outlying villages. And all throughout, she's meeting up with characters that are good for her socially and not so great for her socially. It's kind of just a story about this girl entering into society as a young woman. She has some family history that she's kind of embarrassed about maybe, or just isn't good for her reputation. Yeah, it's basically just her coming into society story, growing up story. Pretty early in, I had decided this was probably only a 2, maybe 3-star read. When I got done with it, I was like, yeah, maybe just 2. But by the time I had slept on it and wrote some notes out, I was like, okay, fine, I guess I'll give it a 3. I was looking back on it fondly and sort of forgetting some of its irritating parts. And anyway, so I did settle on 3 stars for Evelina. As I said before, she reads much more like a Georgette Hare type of a story rather than a Jane Austen or now I know Anne Radcliffe sort of story, because I did read Anne Radcliffe last week for the first time, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So she is much more sort of farcical, sort of silly, sort of not quite, you really have to suspend, belief for a little while to really believe that some of these actions, reactions, or conversations really took place among human beings. But it's still funny in places. It is. I think I got very frustrated with the captain and the Madame Duval's banter. It got old really fast. It was super immature. I didn't find it funny as much as just really irritating. Where oftentimes Jane Austen wrote similar characters, which I actually did find funny and not so annoying. So it's hard not to compare Frances Burney to Jane Austen, partly because they wrote similar types of stories, partly because it seems that Jane Austen did look to her as maybe a role model or somebody that she read for the very least. And, they wrote at a similar time in history. They wrote, within a couple of decades of each other. And so I think, just there's not a lot that we have easily accessible of, from novels from that era. So we kind of just put them all in one category together. But really, if you look at the writing of today, we don't just pair this writer up against this writer all the time and talk about how so-and-so isn't like so-and-so, right? When we go to the bookshop and we look at these different books on the shelves, we're not like, well, I don't know if I really like her because she doesn't write like her. We don't do that, right? We know that they are all separate authors with different, worldviews and writing styles and topics that they write about and all this stuff. So it is kind of unfair to be comparing, but that's just what we do, right? Because honestly, we have a sort of a limited knowledge of English literature from that time as well. I would say the majority of, Jane Austen fans, we still do. That's why we loved Rebecca Romney's book so much this last summer, right? Because we were introduced to new people and all that. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing. So, Evelina, not Jane Austen, but definitely Georgette Hare. So, like I said last week, if Georgette Hare was writing from a model, it wasn't Jane Austen. It was definitely Burney. very similar farcical sort of stories. Lots of melodrama. I think the characters kind of act like they're lots of chatting and crying, right? So it kind of reminded me of like a 90s, soap opera where they all just kind of cry and outbursts and then stand there staring at each other for a minute until the scene changes. That's how I was imagining a lot of the scenes in this book. It's one of those books that really could have been told in a much shorter version of itself, right? Fanny Burney is pretty wordy and she takes kind of a long time to get around to the point, which I actually can't complain about because so do I, but this isn't a polished novel. This is just a chat. I do think that Jane Austen perfected what Fanny Burney started here, so that's a plus. I do have to give her props, though, for her plot twists. So about 2/3 of the way in, I was literally writing my own ending. In fact, I told you guys that if this book did not end the way I wanted it to, I was just going to tell you my made-up ending. Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't even remember my made-up ending because the ending, like what happened in the last third of this book, was pretty fantastic as far as plot twists go, and I had to hand it to Fanny Burney. She actually came up with something better than what I came up with. So I was impressed with that. So I won't have to pretentiously fill in for her. Yeah, she came up with a couple of things that I kind of saw coming, but not in the way that she made it happen. So I thought that was pretty great. I do have quite a bit more Fanny Burney on my shelves yet to read. I will read her again, but probably not for a little bit. I know what to expect now, and I know what kind of mood I need to be in to, I want to say tolerate. That sounds harsh, but that's really kind of what it is. Tolerate her characters if they're going to be similar to some of these. Don't even get me started on her Willoughby character. Like, he was literally toxic, weird, scary, and if women really had to deal with that kind of a person and still be polite and not just stab him or something, props to them. Like, I could not stand him. Jane Austen's Willoughby is a saint compared to Fanny Burney's Willoughby for sure. All right, next up, I reread Ethan Frome. This is probably the first time in close to 20 years I remember reading Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. It ended up getting 2 stars from me. I did not enjoy this book. I mean, in terms of just telling a great story, like the ability to tell a story well, yeah, absolutely. Edith Wharton did a fantastic job helping us to feel all the feelings of this book, and to, see the scenery and to imagine the characters. Like, fantastic writing, but the story itself just glamorizes adultery for whatever many pages we're at. On my book has 99 pages. So I hate books that glamorize adultery. I think it's disgusting. There's nothing romantic about it ever in any way. So I really didn't like the story at all. Ethan Frome is the story of a married man who is attracted to somebody he's not married to. And it's just kind of a quiet story that takes place over just a short time. He has some resentments towards his wife, and the feelings he has for this other girl, I think, kind of help to build those resentments even more. There's a sort of, that's what you get sort of ending. And I guess that was satisfying because of how much I hated the subject matter. But I don't know. It's the second time I've read it. I could do without reading Ethan Frome again, for sure. And that's all I want to say about that. It's done. Hallelujah. Next, I was treated for all of my pains and terrors of having to read Ethan Frome for 1 hour and 45 minutes. I started A Sicilian Romance by Anne Radcliffe. I adored this book. I think I gave it 5 stars. This book, so good. It was so good. It was so, 18th century melodrama, except for there was enough mystery and substance and a little bit of terror even that it made up for any melodramatic spots that I might have happened to reminisce back on my time of reading Evelina and think, oh dear, what did I get myself into? It wasn't like that. Not at all. When I was writing up my Goodreads review, I literally was nodding my head as I hit the 5 star. I was like, yes, absolutely. I really, really liked it. It was the first Anne Radcliffe story that I'd ever read. I don't know if you guys watched that video a little bit ago. I talked about how I had found this nonfiction story called The Mistress of Udolpho, and it's a nonfiction, it's like a biography of Anne Radcliffe, right? It tells her story. And so I wanted to read some of her books before I read that, because you know it's going to be packed out with spoilers. And so I just went and got like 4 or 5 Anne Radcliffe novels, and I'd read through those so I could read through the biography, like, you get it. So I decided this was totally a whim, wasn't on my list. I was just like, I'm just gonna try it and see if I like it. It was predictable all the way through, but I was still like on the edge of my seat reading this. I did not want to put it down. When it ended, I was just like, bummer. Like, I was just into it. A Sicilian Romance is not necessarily a romance. Like, I mean, there is romance within the book, but in these days, romance meant more like a sensation story, right? A tale that has some adventure and action and maybe mystery, as well as, you know, all of the emotional feels and possibly a romance too. But it was more just like maybe what we would call a drama, and not necessarily like a romance, if that makes sense. Like, there's lots of feelings, right? Changing feelings and emotion. It brings out a lot of emotion in the person, but it's not necessarily romantic. Does that make sense? So anyway, it's set in Sicily. It's about a family, and they have, well, the dad of the family has a secret. They are keeping the secret well for him, those who know, but most of the story is centered around one of his daughters, Julia. Events happen, and she goes on a little bit of an adventure, and she eventually discovers her father's secret. And it's just a great story. It's so great. Totally love it. I kept wondering when I was reading Evelina by Fanny Burney, like, do people really talk to each other in this like melodramatic, flowery sort of way? Like, was this really the speech of the time? No, not according to Anne Radcliffe anyway. People did not talk to each other in a way that was not believable, the same way that I found to be the case in Evelina. The story seemed to be very straightforward without like a whole bunch of drama. It was like a breath of fresh air after Evelina and then Ethan Frome. Maybe that's why I liked it so much. Like, maybe it's not great at all. Maybe I just read it on the heels of like 2 not so awesome books. Now, I did pick up on the repetitive floods of fainting in this book. And I thought back to what Rebecca Romney wrote in Jane Austen's bookshelf back in July when I read that. And she talked about how we talk like fight, flight, or freeze, right? And in this case, it was fight, flight, or faint. Like, it's her way of, I have no bodily autonomy here, so I'm just going to pass out. Romney said that the fainting represents the fear that the woman was not able to express. And going back to Evelina, that really creepy Willoughby character was just always on her, with her, bugging her. And what could she do? Like, she couldn't get away and still be like socially acceptably polite. I don't know. It would have looked bad for her if she was the one who was trying to stick up for herself. Like, it's a ridiculous line of thinking, but apparently that's the way things were, because people are fainting all over the place in here, and it usually is, right? That's the response. Even the men are, and it's just like, I can't express myself the way I really want to here, so I'm gonna faint, I guess. All right, and then the last book I finished is called Wired Love by Ella Cheever Thayer. This was the group read in January for Epistolary January, and I had decided not to get it because there was other things that I wanted to read. But then I kept hearing my friends talk about it and realized, I wish I would have got that book. I actually do want to read that, and so I think I mentioned that in a video, or maybe 2. Well, anyway, one of you lovely subscribers ended up ordering this book for me and sending it to me. So thank you so much, Diane. That was really thoughtful of you. I appreciate it so much. So I got right on it as soon as I was done reading the Radcliffe book. And I did end up enjoying this story. At first, I was kind of wondering if I would. It took me a little bit to get into it. It's an epistolary story for the most part, in the sense that it is taking place over telegraph. And I guess that this book was written in the 1880s, I think. And it made kind of a resurgence during the internet, the beginning of the internet age, right? Because this book is about a relationship that is started over the wire between a couple of telegraph operators who live in different cities, and they start flirting over the wire with their telegraph, talk. And then it just goes from there. They end up, obviously meeting and all that. But when we came into the age of chat rooms and email and that kind of stuff, it gave us another way to sort of, meet online. And I do remember in the really early days, if there was a way to send photos of ourselves, we didn't know how. So I can remember my freshman year of college, when we were just learning how to use email and we were just being introduced to chat rooms. It was 97, the fall of 97. There was no sending photos for me anyway, because I had no idea what I was doing. And so it was kind of like this, you just meet people, you don't know what they look like, you don't know if they really are who they say they are, and then you would start getting all the warnings about, make sure you don't give away personal information and all these things. But it was the same idea, right? Meeting someone, talking to them, you could be whoever you want to be, right? Because they can't see you. And so they don't know who you are, right? And that was just kind of a fun era, I guess, to be in. So this book sort of appeared during that time, and then I had not heard of it. So I think it's it had its first go, and then it had its second go, and then it just kind of disappeared. I don't know. I've never heard of it before, but anyway, that was really sweet of Diane to send it to me about, I don't know, probably I'd say, I don't know if it's halfway through. Whenever they have the dinner scene, so if you've read this book, when they have the dinner scene, the feast, that is when everything changed for me. That's when I was like, okay, I really do like this book. I think what was really throwing me off, and really actually was one of the real big beefs that I had with this story, is that there's just a lot of insulting. It showed the character of the author in how critical her characters were about people's looks. And it just bugged me. It wasn't one character has this flaw of always calling out people's looks. It was pretty much most of her characters were picking on other people or deciding whether or not they liked someone based on the way that they looked. For instance, one woman who lives in the apartments, I guess, where one of the characters lives, is described as a 175-pound woman, blah, 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 blah. That's how she's described and that is, supposed to have been an enormously heavy weight enough to comment on, apparently. So nobody worked out in those days, apparently, ladies. But it was that. There was another character who was actually kind of weird in his personality and probably was kind of gross in his hygiene, but all they could ever comment on was his red hair. Red hair, red hair. He has red hair. Isn't it gross? Good thing this guy doesn't have red hair. I was like, my goodness. I get it. I understand the connotation of the red hair in the times and where they lived, and I get it, but it was gross. It was just really off-putting, and many times the way someone looked, and oftentimes things that they couldn't help, like their social class or their job that they were forced into, or the color of their hair, things that couldn't really be helped much. That was how they were judging people's character, and it just rubbed me the wrong way and annoyed me. And so it really took the story starting to really pick up for me to start really enjoying this book. I did like how the characters in the story really had agency to go the directions they wanted to go with their lives. Again, the book was first published in 1880, so we were still in a time when, that wasn't always the case, but these characters did. Some characters chose career over something that, as the reader, you thought maybe they should have chosen instead. Some of the decisions were surprising for a book of this time. And so I did appreciate how the author was very careful to give her characters their own minds and their own choices, and just, agency over their destiny, I guess, over their future. I did love that a lot. I think that is a healthy form of, pro-women's ideology, where it is allowing each person to have that autonomy. So I thought that was really good. The other really big beef that I had with this book is really not the story itself, it's the editing. It's not well edited at all. There's lots and lots of places where just words like don't have a space between them, or things were not spelled correctly. And I just want to point that out if you are one of those people that I feel like I'm petty every time I talk about this, but I really think it's a thing. You know how some people like really struggle with mouth noises? Okay, well, I really struggle with bad editing. Like, I just can't. It's like, it distracts me so much and makes me just not respect the book. And this woman who annotated and edited this book and came out with this, current copy, they're like print on demand sort of copies. She's got this little company where she is annotating and editing older works that are maybe not so commonly read, and then publishing them out there for people. And I think it's a great idea. I just feel like if you're going to take all that time and spend all that money, spend money on an editor, right? That is not yourself. You can be the best writer ever, but you can't edit your own work. It's just, you just can't. You got to have somebody else do it. So anyway, I did struggle with that. Did I say I gave it 3 stars? I don't know if I did or not, but I did. I gave it 3 stars. So overall, super cute story. Like I said, it reminded me of the early 90s. It's just that whole, mysterious, fun and mysterious then, and now extremely terrifying to talk to someone that you don't know. Especially where in this case, the guy on the other end, or girl on the other end, right? They did know where each other was based on their, code for the telegraph office or whatever. So yeah, pretty bold move there, kids. But anyway, overall, enjoyed the story. It's gonna stay on my shelf as a fun epistolary novel that I will probably pick up again in the future, and a nice gift from my friend Diane. So thank you. All right, and then last book, I am currently reading Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I am about 46 pages in. I'm on chapter 7, and I'm really enjoying this so far. I've read it once before, but I didn't really understand what I was reading. It was quite a while ago and I didn't really get it, but I am loving this. I really love Anne Bronte's writing style, and it's just completely different to me than Agnes Grey was. I read Agnes Grey, I reread it for just twice. I think I've read it a few months ago, and it was just a little slog. But this one is bright and fresh, and I'm loving it. I also am loving her preface, where she basically just kind of tells people off. People are going off about, the content of this book and how it's just not proper. She's like, I'm not watering this information down for you. I'm not here to make a buck. I'm trying to give a social commentary on abusive, gross people. Abusive, gross, situations and how people get out of them. So she just wrote I've got notes all over the place on these 2 pages of her introduction. Be it understood, I shall not limit my ambition to this, or even to producing a perfect work of art, time and talent so spent. I should consider it wasted and misapplied. Her desire, and my comment was, her desire was to minister and to warn, not to write something sensational for fame. She says, such humble talents as God has given me, I will endeavor to put to their greatest use. If I am able to amuse, I will try to benefit too. And when I feel it my duty to speak an unpalatable truth, with the help of God, I will speak it, though it be to the prejudice of my name and to the detriment of my readers' immediate pleasure, as well as to my own. My Facebook cover says, speak the truth even when your voice shakes. And that's what she's saying here, right? She has a message. It's a social commentary on just the situations that women can find themselves in, and with no help. Who's there to help them? All society did was look down on a divorced woman a woman with a child who, you know, is not married anymore or out of wedlock or whatever, rather than giving grace and helps, a lot of times it was, well, you made your bed, now go lie in it. And that's messy and messed up. People didn't like her characters. She says, when we have to do with vice and vicious characters, I maintain it is better to depict them as they really are than as they would wish to appear. Like, I'm writing real characters. This is not to entertain you as much as it is to warn you, to educate you, to bring up the issues that abused and neglected women, wives and mothers were facing, because this was her only platform, right? She couldn't just get up and start saying this stuff at, you know, town hall. That'd be extremely inappropriate, especially since she was a pastor's daughter. So she had to write out those commentaries and those frustrations and ideas for, you know, reform in the form of her novels. We find that a lot of people were doing that in the 18th and 19th centuries. So I think after reading through this, after reading the Anne Bronte biography that I read last month, or maybe it was end of January, and then reading through this, just kind of getting a better feel for Anne Bronte and her voice, maybe I will go back and read Agnes Grey in a year or two and see if my perspective changes. She does have a comment here on Agnes Grey. She says, the story of Agnes Grey was accused of extravagant overcoloring in those very parts that were carefully copied from life. So people, you know, people who had not lived in the way, people who had not walked in Anne Bronte's shoes, had all kinds of commentary about Agnes Grey, which was a story that literally could have been written from life, because Agnes Grey was a very similar character to Anne Bronte in her real life. So anyway, that's the commentary on the story. I guess the story so far, I haven't read like the spoilers in the back. I don't want to read any more spoilers than I've already read, because that Anne Bronte biography that I did read by Samantha Ellis, it was packed out with spoilers. I was trying really hard to skip over things and not get any idea of what was going on. But the narrator right now is a young man. He has a little brother and a little sister. They're all like either late teens or young adults. They live with their mother, and someone has moved into an estate nearby. It's called Wildfell Hall, and the woman is very mysterious who has moved in there. It appears just to be her and her young son. And so things are just getting started. The woman is an artist. She's a painter, it looks like, and that's how she makes her money. And so it's just kind of getting started as this man is describing this woman. She's mysterious. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't get along. They have kind of a love-hate relationship right now, but a lot of it is because the man seems to poke around in her business, and she doesn't want him poking around in her business at all. But her son is very interested in being this man's friend because he has a dog, and the little boy is interested in his dog. So that's just kind of where we're at right now, is just kind of being introduced to these characters and this mysterious woman at Wildfell Hall. But I am enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to just having some time tonight just to sit down and read this for a while, because I think that it's one of those I'm engrossed in already. I think I'm gonna move pretty quickly through it and get a good start on my march on the moors. So that's where I'm at. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you get some cozy reading this week. Hope I get some cozy reading this week. That is the plan. I will see you all soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.